And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to The Turning Point for ITN Sri Lanka. The Turning Point is a program discussing politics, economics, matters close to your heart, the people of Sri Lanka. We try to ask your questions and try to get our experts to answer your questions too. And it's on ITN Sri Lanka after a very long time, and the number to send your questions to will come up on the screen. It's 0772 300 305. There you are. It's on the screen there. And let's find out, shall we, who our expert today is and what viewpoint he has. Let's take a look. And of course, we're delighted to be able to welcome our guest today, Mr.DILSHAN FERDINANDO, former director at Access Projects Private Limited and a builder. Good evening, Dilshan, and thank you for coming on Turning Point.
Good evening, Faraz, and a pleasure to be here on your show.
Thank you. I must say at the outset that you're probably the best-dressed builder I have met.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So what do you build?
Well, a builder mostly is involved in building, for me, is hotels, educational institutions. Not much, of course, in my experience of roads and bridges,
right,
but mostly buildings in the tourist industry,
right,
and in education.
Thanks, Dilshan. Now, tell me, you spent your entire working life, I believe, in the private sector.
Yes.
So, how have you found the last 2 years to be in Sri Lanka?
Okay, so from the construction industry point of view, we went through COVID, where the whole country was shut down. But during that period, still the construction industry survived. And then we had the economic downturn. And at that point, the construction industry virtually came to a halt because of the funding of projects. And these are mainly funded projects plus government projects because the country went bankrupt. And that's about nearly 40% of the construction industry. The private projects still continued, but then we also had the issue of not being able to get our resources, mainly because the imports were restricted. And there was issues with shortages of cement, steel prices, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So we had real issues in terms of finding alternatives and moving on. The last 2 years, if you take from 2022 onwards, there has been some stability in the raw material prices. The steel has come down in price, and there is an availability of the raw materials. Although our costs in terms of the raw materials, when you take cement, steel, and other imported items, are higher than the region. So we are much higher in steel than in India. We are much higher than in cement from India if you compare. So which makes our cost of construction much higher to our regional neighbors.
And why does that happen? How come we are more expensive?
Probably due to only having a few players in the market.
So like a monopoly situation?
Sort of, yes. So if we take steel, there aren't too many people in the steel industry. Also, it's not possible for anyone to bring in steel from, we'll say, Dubai or China or Russia. It won't get approved by the local consultants. So that itself is a hindrance.
Is that sort of protectionism?
Not really, because steel is a very important part of any structure.
Yeah.
And the consultants are very careful that the steel should not be of an inferior quality.
Right.
So due to that only that we have some sort of quality mechanisms by the consultants. And that prevents this steel, which is much cheaper in other countries, brought into Sri Lanka.
But that sort of suggests that they think that our quality is much better.
Yes, and in certain projects, steel is brought in from other countries. where the consultants are international.
Right.
So the way the international consultants look at steel and the way that the local consultants look at steel, there's a big difference.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Because it also sort of lends suspicion that there's some element of corruption.
Yes. Not in the part of the consultants mainly, but let's say that you brought in this word corruption,
Yeah.
which is in the minds of all the people in Sri Lanka at
Yes.
this moment in time.
Absolutely.
But it has got very little to do with the supply of material. It's mainly actually isolated to a certain sector. And I suppose that it's part and parcel of the industry where corrupt practices are seen as normal. So that being said, the projects that have been done over the last, say, 10, 15 years have brought in some benefits to the country. But at the same time, there's a heavy price to pay.
So what we really need is some form of a something on the lines of a monopolies commission or a competitiveness watchdog or something like that.
I believe we have what is called a fair trading commission.
Right.
We also have SLS, Sri Lanka standards, that doesn't allow any inferior product to come into the country. But I think we are, being a small country and a small economy, this is part of the problem that we will have to face. If we are not India, which is a huge market, where anybody can sell and there'll be thousands of steel fabricators.
Yeah.
So being Sri Lanka, a small market, a small economy for construction, I think we will probably have this issue.
So going back to this question of how have we fared in the last 2 years?
Yeah.
We're stable.
We are stable.
What prospects for growth?
Right now, the industry is climbing out of the trough.
Right.
We had this same situation in 2009 at the end of the civil unrest. There are lots of jobs that are being offered for the small timers. There aren't big projects because the country still has not got foreign funding. But the smaller contractors have enough jobs to quote for. There is a big issue with not having enough experienced technical staff.
Right.
Engineers, draftsmen, quantity surveyors, because all these guys have got probably PR and overseas jobs, and they would rather possibly continue for maybe a year or two and then they go abroad. So the industry is facing that issue of a brain drain.
Right.
And industry has adjusted to that by giving higher pay to keep the good ones. And we also have a very good system of new young people coming into the market.
Because some weeks ago, President Wickremesinghe was talking about this very thing, the brain drain.
Yeah.
But he pointed out the need on the one side to attract incoming dollars and on the other side to stop the brain drain. So that's the sort of the swing, I suppose.
I believe people going out to the Middle East and bringing in the dollars is actually not a problem at all. It should be encouraged. The country needs dollars. These people, they go out, they get better experienced in much better projects, and they come back fully accomplished engineers.
Yeah.
To fill the role, we also have universities and other institutions that actually churn out engineers and quantity surveyors and technical people to fill that gap. And these guys, after the paper qualification, do need experience. So I believe that it's an issue for the employer and for the companies. But as a whole, if you take it in a broader view, I believe it is okay for the country to export not housemaids, but skilled people.
And would you, at what point do you think, in terms of the size of our economy, would we be able to attract our young professionals, our young skilled people, to actually stay here because they can earn as much money as they did if they went to the Middle East, for example?
I would answer you that question for us in a different way. I believe more and more Sri Lankan companies should go out of Sri Lanka, take our young people with them, and do work in the East African region, in Mauritius, in other countries that open up for us. It is just that some incentive, if it can be given by the state sector, to enable the local construction companies to set foot, export in the company itself, then I think it's far better.
What kind of incentive would a construction company need?
Probably tax benefits. So as I touch upon this subject, we also don't have the companies spending much money on R&D. So let's put R&D aside. But if there are tax benefits given for companies to set up, let's say, offshore offices in other countries where they take our expertise, why we have Chinese coming here and working for us, and Indian companies working for us, why can't we go and do these things? So I think if we have the number of people and the experienced people, rather than saying that, okay, let's get them back, let's go with them. You know, why be stuck in a smaller society or a smaller economic society? Why not go out? So I believe that it's time for the big thinkers in the private sector to set up offices. But of course, if there is some support from the government to set up these offices, I think it will be a big help. Tax breaks need to be given.
And I do notice that there are a few companies who seem to have forayed out into East Africa and Central Africa as well.
Correct.
And I think some other companies have done that but are now delisting in Sri Lanka and going to list again elsewhere. What's the pros and cons of keeping a company listed here?
To be quite honest for us, I'm not that conversant with the share market or the CSE here. But I would probably say that there is a huge scope for Sri Lankan professionals outside of Sri Lanka. And it would be really great if the companies itself shift over there.
On that note, Dilshan, let's go for a quick break. This is the Turning Point, and we'll be back soon after this break to rejoin Dilshan Ferdinando, former director at Access Projects Private Limited and a builder. See you on the other side of the break. And welcome back to the Turning Point for ITN Sri Lanka. My guest this evening, Dilshan Ferdinando, retired former director at Access Projects Private Limited, and, as I said before, a builder. Now, as a builder, Dilshan Ferdinando, why is it that our cost of construction in this country is quite high? Why is that?
Very difficult question to answer for us, but I believe that our economy is very small, and there are only a few players in the main materials market, like cement, steel, and ceramic ware, aluminium. Timber usually is mostly imported. Our local industry uses mainly mahogany and teak, but they are of the higher value items. So why our construction cost is high, I can only attribute to having a small number of suppliers who work in cohesion in setting the prices.
So this is probably why the raw materials are more expensive?
Yeah, because you can't, the raw material for a steel billet is not produced in Sri Lanka. It comes from overseas. So India, of course, produces steel billets, but then when you compare the billet that comes to Sri Lanka, which is turned into taut steel or the construction material steel, our cost in Sri Lanka is about 60% higher than in India.
But that's significant.
It is significant. Even if you take cement, it is around the same. if you compare a 50 kg bag of cement in India, it will be about like 1,000 to 1,400. In Sri Lanka, it is 2,400. So where and how this disparity exists is possibly due to the number of players in the market. And we've also had some crazy situations in the past where steel was in short supply, cement was in short supply. But once the prices increased, there's a steady supply. So I believe that our construction costs are way above the region, way above the region. So whether that in effect will deter investors to come to Sri Lanka is the question.
So in a way, all these matters long term taken, when you look at it as a whole, adds to the high cost of living in this country, higher
For sure.
Higher cost of everything, really.
For sure, for sure. The high cost of construction means that an ordinary person cannot build a house with his salary. So where does he go? And add the high interest rates. So you then have a major issue. So to make housing more affordable, then the government will go and invest in housing at the expense of the taxpayer. So I believe that if we need to bring down the cost of construction, the private sector, with the help of the government or the authorities, should explore why we are exporting ilmenite and importing titanium dioxide for the paint industry at 3 times the price. So it happens all the time. We export a basic raw material and import
at a premium.
At a premium, and somebody else makes money out of it. So we know that we have phosphorus, and we know that with the extracting of phosphorus, the potassium, you get gypsum, artificial gypsum. That is a byproduct of the fertilizer industry. But we don't have that industry going forward simply because of the environmentalist and certain setbacks. So while we have actually a 98% literate society, why are we here in this state, whereas other countries have moved forward? So I believe that the whole thing rests, including the construction costs, on an imbalance.
Is that imbalance caused by underperforming public service officials who either lack the vision or can't be bothered, or a bit of both?
Both. I believe it's both. So when we take sand, say for the Colombo region, the sand gets transported 100 kilometers from Mahayangana side on the east. We have mined sea sand, which is not used much for construction of concrete. We have then the washed sand, which is a new one, and we still don't have too much of manufactured sand. But all in all, the cost of sand is very high, which is a basic raw material. So I think being a small country, we import everything and we are used to it. And the government earns revenue out of taxing what is imported. So that's another area. So they can't afford to let go of that. And they earn an income out of it. So I think construction cost being high is not that great for the country, for us. Why would an investor come to Sri Lanka when they can go to Thailand or Vietnam and basically build at a much lower price?
And where the market is bigger.
Market is bigger and it's more opportunity. Why would you spend more money per square foot as a foreigner when you can easily go to another country which has better taxation, lower cost of living? So I believe that the government should get somewhat involved in only making policy changes. I don't think the government can get involved much by, it will be a disaster. So they should just stay back, make some policy changes. At this moment, I believe the construction industry is taxed 30%. So there was a time when the industry was taxed 18%. So you need to balance it off somewhere for us. And this balancing act has to be done with professionals and experts to make sure that the industry actually grows, contributes to the national economy. I believe that we are about 4.5% of the GDP. Okay, but how one calculates that is something else.
And when you look at government spend and so on, and the private sector, do you believe that this government that we have in power right now, or because we are entering this period of elections, whoever comes in, do you believe that the only way forward is drawn on the basis of the IMF proposals?
Okay, so now that we come to the IMF and that subject matter, over the last 10, 15 years, we as Sri Lankans have been spending beyond what we can afford. And that being said, we have borrowed money on projects that possibly were over budgeted. I mean, the disparity between the engineer's estimate and the actual cost of these projects are huge. We don't have enough research to pinpoint and say that why these projects actually ended up being huge white elephants. So I believe that this whole thing about the IMF and where we are, basically we deserve to be here. We all consumed more. Up to the kite was imported from China. In our childhood, we used to make kites, but now the kite and even the Vesak lantern, it used to come from China. So we got used to this society with these principles of importing everything and paying, and to import, we never exported enough money. So our traditional export has always been rubber, tea, and coconut, and now garments. Beyond that, there's very little growth. So I believe that construction should be another export. And I hope that in time to come, the income from construction will match the other major exports. We already have the construction industry professionals bringing in money.
Right.
From working in Qatar, from the Middle East, from Saudi Arabia. So I believe that it is okay for this drain to happen as long as they bring back money, but it's not okay for people to go to Australia on a PR, having been brought up in a free education system.
Last and final question, very few seconds left. Is the future here? Is the future now? How bright is that future?
Future is always bright for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is a country that will never go down. So Sri Lankans are resilient, they are versatile, and they will never fail.
Dilshan Ferdinando, thank you very much for being on The Turning Point. And that's the way it was today with Dilshan Ferdinando, former director at Access Projects Private Limited and a builder. And thank you for his input. And that's the way it was. Bless you all.